Are you struggling to get the best results with your direct moxa treatments? If your patients aren't experiencing the deep, long-lasting relief that direct moxa is known for, that I can guarantee that you're making one mistake. And it's a mistake that most practitioners make. And that mistake is not controlling the heat quality. I'm Maya Suzuki with ShinKyu University. Getting the right heat quality and the right outcome to your direct moxa or Tonetsu moxa isn't just about burning the moxa. It's about making sure that the heat penetrates deeply and spreads evenly and in the places that you want it to be. And if you're missing that, your treatments will not reach their full potential. By the end of this video, you'll know the exact steps to mastering the heat quality for your moxa cones. You'll learn about the factors that affect it, the moxa quality, the size of the cone, the density of cone. You'll understand what affects it, the quality of the cone, the size of the cone, density of the cone, and of course the airflow to that cone. And this is all so you can start improving your moxa practice immediately. Plus, I'm going to give you a simple yet powerful technique to control the moxa heat quality today. And if you want one-on-one guidance on how to really dial in your moxa practice, you're going to want to set up a chat with me, which is linked in the description box below. This is really just a conversation about where your moxa practice is at and where you would like to take it. I'd love to help you master these techniques personally. I first started learning moxa when I was an apprentice before I even went to acupuncture school at Toyo ShinKyu Senmon. Now, I worked at Akira Harikyuin or Acupuncture Clinic for a year before even entering school as an assistant, helping with moxa, front desk, cleaning, all the things. And I actually worked myself up into a position that allowed me to do direct moxa on patients. How I was able to do that is with the exact steps I'm going to teach you today, and they're also the exact steps that I relearned once I entered into Toyo ShinKyu Senmon, the acupuncture school I went to in Japan. Now, these are also the exact steps that I teach my students within ShinKyu University with one-on-one mentorship. So again, if you're interested in really elevating your moxa practice, you're going to want to set up an interview and see if that's a right fit for you. First factor that you need to know about is moxa quality. And when I say moxa quality really matters, it really matters. Now here I have 3 different moxa qualities. In the center, we have Miyabi. Now, Miyabi is a very high quality, actually this is a brand of moxa from Kobayashi Ryoho. It's one I like the best, and it's something that you're gonna want to use for your half grain Tonetsu practice. Now, the reason why that you're gonna wanna use a high grade Tonetsu moxa is because it's actually made a little bit differently. Now, to understand how moxa is made, you're gonna want to see it. So if you can see, moxa is actually made from mugwort leaves. Now, mugwort leaves have these beautiful feathers on the bottom of them, and mugwort actually grows native to every single continent in the world. So people in the hills of Nepal, all the way to those here in Colorado, where I'm at right now, all natively used mugwort as part of their medicinal practices. It's a really awesome plant. How it's used for Moxibustion is that we will take the spring leaves of the plant and dry them, and then grind them down in a pestle and mortar, and then sieve out the debris. Now, at what stage that you stop grinding it and sieving out the debris will give you a completely different quality of moxa. Now, to put them in order from the highest quality moxa to the lowest quality moxa that I own would be to do this. Now, you can actually see from the video that the lower quality moxa actually is going to have a poor color to it. It's going to be a dark color, whereas this really high quality of moxa is actually going to have a light color, almost a white yellowish color. This mid-grade quality matsu is going to have something in between. Now, again, as I said, these are just different qualities of moxa, meaning that they just stopped earlier in the process or later in the process of grinding down and sieving out their moxa. But if you purchase high quality moxa, you've already gotten a high quality product. Now, how that really makes a difference is that a high quality product is going to burn at a lower heat temperature. And a low quality product, like this one over here, is going to burn at a higher heat temperature. So how do we utilize these moxa tools differently? Low quality moxa, this is great for a takegyu, what's now often called ontake, a bamboo roller. And it's also something that you could make a stick moxa out of. This mid-grade is really great for chinetsu. You could also do chinetsu with a lower grade if you wanted to, and also for needle top moxa. Now, your high grade moxa is utilized for your half grain and full grain tonetsu or direct moxa cones. And you really want to make sure you utilize this because again, it's going to burn at a lower temperature. Now, our half grain cones ideally are at a very warm temperature. We don't want these cones to be hot. And that's why utilizing a higher grade of moxa automatically will set you up for success. It's also going to be a lot easier to roll your cones because lower grade moxa, super hard to roll. Higher grade moxa, easier to roll, and that's because they have smaller fibers. Now, I can hear those out there. They're a little bit like me and are a little bit stingy with their money, and they're like, yeah, Maya, but this is really expensive. Can't I just cut corners? The answer is yes, you can definitely cut corners, but your patients are going to feel the difference because again, a high quality moxa is going to give you a lower temperature in burn, and it's going to be a softer and gentler heat, which is usually what we're trying to attain for when using a half grain or again, a direct moxa rice grain cone. Now, just a side note, I am using a lot of terminology interchangeably. Tonetsu is the Japanese word for direct moxa. Direct moxa is sometimes called rice grain moxa, but really within rice grain moxa, there are two different kinds of moxa we can do, half grain and full grain, meaning that it's a full grain of sushi rice or a half grain of sushi rice. Ideally, a tonetsu or direct moxa practice should be half the size of a grain of sushi rice because it's going to be smaller. And that leads us into the second thing we should talk about, which is the size and of course the shape of our cones. Now, it's really important that the size of your cone is again about a half grain size of that piece of sushi rice. The smaller the cone means the less product is burning, which means that product isn't going to be as warm. Saying that, if we don't have a good shape to our cone, about the shape of a Mount Fuji, it's going to be a nice cone, what happens is it won't burn evenly. And if it doesn't burn evenly, you run the risk of that cone being hot. Now, the last factor that I did talk about is, of course, density. A dense cone or a cone that has been over-rolled is going to give you a much hotter burn because the moxa has really been packed into that cone, and therefore there's more product to burn, and it's going to burn hotter because there's just more product. No matter how high quality of a product you use, the denser the cone, the hotter it's going to burn. So always make sure that you have a high quality product, half grain size, you can even measure it for yourself, a nice cone shape, and it's going to be so soft and fluffy. Feel like a piece of cotton or a dandelion, the dandelion fluff. Now, the last piece that we haven't chatted about is, of course, airflow. Now, traditionally, airflow would not be flowing onto your half grain practice because airflow is going to make that moxa cone burn faster. If you've ever burned on a fire, it's going to speed up the burn, and it also intensifies the burn while the airflow is touching it. So traditionally in the summer, we would have blown on the cones because we wanted to make a slightly hotter cone in order to disperse the client. And yes, you can disperse with moxa. That's a whole nother subject. But in the winter, we would not blow on the cone because we wanted a nice warm cone in order to tonify the client. So in general, make sure that you don't have direct airflow blowing on your half grain cone, not to mention it's going to make it really difficult for those little cones to stand up. Now, I did promise you that I was going to show you a practice that really does help get your practice up to speed and is going to teach you how to do all of these things right now today, and of course, how to control that heat quality. So make sure to watch. We're going to go into it right now. All right, now to do this practice, you're going to need a few tools. One, rummage through your kitchen and you're going to want to get a magnetic pie tin. Now you're also going to want to have around 4 or 5 really good magnets. Steal them from your fridge, no one will know. You're also going to want to have a tissue. Now usually tissues are going to be 1 ply or 3 ply. This is a 1 ply, meaning that there's only one piece to the tissue. Now this tissue here is a 3 ply. Now, ideally, you want to have a 2-ply tissue. They don't sell them as much in the US anymore, but you can just go in the middle, get a 3-ply tissue, take off one of the layers, set that aside. You won't be needing it anymore. And we're going to put that straight on top of our pie tin. Now, on top of that, We're going to get some magnets, and we're going to really make sure that we have a flat surface in order to start our tissue practice. Now I have 3 magnets here. Ideally you should use 4 just to make sure we don't have any extra airflow underneath. Now I've really detailed this whole practice in an older video that I made, but I'm just going to recap here. Now outside of that, you're also going to want to have an ashtray. You're going to want to have some incense sticks. If you're interested in what kind of incense I love to do my direct moxa, put it in the comments below. I'm more than happy to show you. I love this incense. No, it has a great smell, very little scent, and also the ash is not too much and doesn't break easily. So great incense. And then of course some high grade quality moxa and your lighter. Now I am a right-handed person, so I'm going to set up my tools in a way that really makes sense for my hand. Ashtray on this side, lighter on this side, moxa is going to be on my left, incense over here. And then I'm going to start my practice. Now, usually I take my students through rolling and placing and roll, place, and burn. But in order to just really give you a trick to master what you're doing, we're going to do a close-up and I'm going to tell you what I want you to do today. Now, the best trick I can teach you to really controlling your moxa is that you need to be very specific about what you're doing. And I want you to, when you start rolling, start to do one major trick, and that is stop using the boards, start using your fingers. The reason for this is that when we're doing a half grain moxa practice, when you roll with your thumb and index of your non-dominant hand, it's going to give you the ability to decide the size and shape and density of each cone as you make it. Now, the important thing for that is that you can now have the choice of how big and how small, how dense, how soft each cone is every single time. So I really like this because it gives you variability to a direct moxa practice. Now, if you've learned how to use the boards and use a bamboo stick, that is a different style of moxa. So it is going to be a little bit different, but ideally, initially, you learn how to roll with your fingers, and then you can move on to doing the half grain cones with the bamboo. The reason for that is that you get to learn the variability. Now, every single time that you roll with your fingers, I want you to think about only moving your thumb. So to show you, what I'm doing is rolling my thumb back and forth enough so that way I have a half grain cone coming out. So again, rolling back and forth just enough. Do you see how that little piece just popped out? So that way I can grab my piece and place it down. Again, rolling just enough. That way I have my half grain piece and I can place it down. Again, rolling just enough, half grain piece, and then placing it down. And you're going to do that over and over again. Now, what a lot of people end up doing as a detriment to their practice is with their incense, I'll show you with the incense stick so it's easier to see, is they end up rolling their cones like this, or they roll both fingers back and forth. Now, the reason why that can be a really big detriment to your practice is because it makes a really dense cone. And the reason why I'm a huge proponent of teaching what my teachers taught me, which is back and forth just a little, is that it makes a very specific size every time, and the density is not going to go over the moon because you're not touching it a lot. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to that rule. If people are pinching their cones here, they're going to be rolling it here, and that's going to make a dense cone. So that's the number one thing I'd like you to practice in order to create your half grain cones and make sure you control that heat quality. Now, the very last thing that I would like to teach you about controlling heat quality, I have to show you with a stick, is learning how to tent. Now, if you haven't already learned how to tent your half grain cones, now's a great time to do it. Usually with a half grain cone, I'm going to be lighting with my right hand and then tenting with my right hand. So just to show you, I'll show you from both angles. If I'm to light a cone, I'm going to tent with my fingers above the cone. Now, oftentimes what people end up doing is touching the whole cone here. And you'll see that even from the side, you can't really see what I'm doing. Let's show you a different angle. If I were to make a cone and place my cone and light my cone and go here, what I end up doing if I'm touching is that I can't really see what's happening because I'm covering the mox. And that, in that case, what ends up happening is you could have your cone burn all the way down to the tissue without meaning it to, or all the way down to the patient's skin, and it's going to be hot for your client. So instead, what you want to do is when you place and light your cone, I want you to really control the flow of air above it. So I'm not even touching the tissue here, and that's going to allow you to control your heat quality without even touching the cone and seeing your work. Now, to understand how heat quality and controlling your density and the airflow to your moxa and size and shape really works, you're going to need to put in the time, energy, and effort. And that means putting in the practice hours. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you have any of them, you can put them in the comments below, and you can also reach out to me on social media. I'd be happy to help your practice grow. Now, again, what I'm teaching you is not something that I made up. It's something that I learned while not only becoming a practitioner for Acupuncture Clinic from my fellow assistants at the clinic, but also what I relearned when I went into acupuncture school in Japan and continued to practice there for 3 years afterwards and become licensed, of course, in the country. So moxa practice itself has this very, very strong foundation, and there are some core principles that if you can just get them under your belt, going into varied different moxa traditions will become so seamless and so easy for you. Now, with all of these techniques, of course, I have taught them to countless students within ShinKyu University, and I found that every single person, it is a huge help to not only dial in their practice, but also to elevate it to the next level. Mastering Moxibustion requires that you fine-tune your heat quality, period. And if you're ready to really fine-tune your moxa practice, and of course your acupuncture, shonishin, and palpation practice as well, and really get a strong foundation in traditional Japanese medicine, then let's set up a time to talk, because that is what ShinKyu University does, and that is what I am so excited to offer you and your practice. Now, if you would really like to dive deep into the practice that I just gave you, you can watch this video right over here. That it was one of my first videos I ever made about Moxibustion.